The mining station floated 3 million kilometers from the sun, close enough that the heat shields glowed a dull red even through the cooling systems. Inside the cramped control room, Danny Foster wiped sweat from his forehead and stared at the screen that showed impossible readings. "Run it again," he told the computer for the 5th time that hour. The sensors swept across the sun's surface, measuring temperature, radiation, magnetic fields. Everything looked normal except for one thing. The fusion reactions inside the sun were too perfect. Stars were supposed to be chaotic, with hot spots and cool zones moving randomly across their surface. But Sol had patterns, geometric patterns that repeated every 6 hours and 43 minutes. Danny had been a solar engineer for 12 years. He had installed these mining probes himself, machines that skimmed helium-3 from the upper atmosphere of the sun to power Earth's fusion reactors. He knew what normal looked like. This was not normal. His partner, Linda Yu, floated through the doorway carrying 2 coffee bulbs. She had been sleeping during the last shift, and her hair stuck out in zero gravity like a dark halo around her head. "You look terrible," she said, handing him a coffee. "Have you been staring at those readings all night? Look at this." Danny pulled up the thermal map. "See these hexagonal shapes? They're each about 2,000 kilometers across. They form a perfect grid across the entire visible surface." Linda squinted at the display. "Could be magnetic field artifacts. The sun has structure. Magnetic fields don't make perfect hexagons, and watch this." Danny ran a time lapse showing the last 3 months of data. The hexagons didn't just sit there. They rotated slowly, all of them moving in coordination like gears in a machine. Linda's expression changed from tired to alert in seconds. "That's not natural." "No, it's not." They sent their findings to Earth that same day. Response took 8 minutes to arrive because of the distance. When it came, it was not what Danny expected. "Cease all observation immediately. Delete all records of anomalous readings. Return to standard mining operations. This is a direct order from Solar Operations Command." Danny and Linda looked at each other in confusion. In 12 years of work, Danny had never been told to delete data. Scientists didn't hide discoveries. They investigated them. "They already know," Linda said quietly. "They've known for a while, and they don't want anyone else to find out." Danny thought about ignoring the order. He thought about sending the data to news organizations or scientific journals. But he also thought about his job, his family back on Earth, and the way governments tended to treat people who leaked classified information. He deleted the files, but he kept one copy, hidden in his personal storage under a fake name, just in case. 3 weeks later, everything changed. A woman named Claire Donovan appeared on every screen across Earth and the colonies at the same time. She was young, maybe 30, with dark circles under her eyes and the kind of intensity that made people stop and listen. Behind her stood what looked like a research laboratory, and on the screens behind her were the same hexagonal patterns Danny had discovered. "My name is Claire Donovan. I'm an astrophysicist with the Solar Research Institute, and I'm about to tell you something that will change everything you think you know about human history." She had everyone's attention. Unauthorized broadcasts to every channel simultaneously didn't happen by accident. Someone with serious resources was backing her. 2 months ago, I discovered the same thing that others have found and been forced to hide. Our sun is not natural. It has been modified. The patterns you're seeing aren't random. They're the surface layer of a machine, a structure built inside the sun itself. Images appeared showing probe data, mathematical models, energy readings that painted a picture of something vast hidden beneath the solar surface. This discovery should have been announced immediately. Instead, every government on Earth and Mars classified it at the highest level. They've known for at least 7 years. But I believe the people deserve the truth, so I'm releasing everything we know. The next image made Danny's breath catch. It showed a 3-dimensional model of the sun's interior. The core wasn't just fusing hydrogen into helium like textbooks said. It was wrapped in machinery, structures that extended from the core to the surface in a web of impossible complexity. "We call it the Prometheus Array," Claire continued. "It's a stellar forge, a manufacturing system that uses the sun's entire output to create matter at the atomic level. Based on our analysis, It can produce materials that shouldn't exist outside of laboratory conditions. It can build ships, stations, habitats, weapons, anything. And it can do it faster than our entire industrial civilization combined. She paused, letting that sink in. The array was built approximately 27,000 years ago, by humans, by our ancestors during a time when our species was supposed to be living in caves and hunting with stone tools. Someone hit a star-sized factory inside our sun, and then all knowledge of it vanished from history, until now. The broadcast cut to black. Within seconds, governments were issuing statements calling it a hoax, a sophisticated fake designed to create panic. But Danny knew better. He had seen those hexagons himself. He had felt the wrongness of the readings. The truth was out, and nothing would ever be the same. Within a week, Claire Donovan became the most famous person in human space. She released terabytes of data backing up her claims. Independent scientists confirmed everything. The sun was artificial, or at least modified, and humanity had done it sometime in the deep past. Religious groups struggled to fit this into their worldviews. Some said it proved humans were created by advanced aliens who left the array as a gift. Others said it proved humans were descended from a fallen civilization that had reached the stars before and collapsed. Danny watched it all from the mining station, feeling disconnected from the chaos below. Linda spent most of her time reading forums and news feeds, trying to make sense of the theories flooding the network. "They're sending a probe," she told Danny one morning. "A direct dive into the photosphere. They're going to scan the array up close." "That's insane. Nothing survives that close to the sun." They built a new kind of heat shield, magnetic containment with some kind of exotic cooling system. The probe launches in 2 days. Danny pulled up the mission details. The probe was called Icarus 7, and it was designed for a one-way trip. It would dive into the sun's upper atmosphere, scan the array's surface structures, and transmit data until it burned up. The entire mission would last less than 10 minutes. The world watched as Icarus 7 launched from Earth orbit. Cameras tracked it all the way to the sun, broadcasting live feeds to billions of viewers. Danny should have been working, but instead he sat in the control room with Linda, both of them staring at the screens. The probe hit the photosphere and immediately started sending data. The images were blurry from the heat and radiation, but they showed enough. The hexagonal plates weren't just patterns on the surface. They were doors, enormous hatches covering openings that led into the sun's interior. "It's hollow," Linda whispered. "The sun is hollow. Not completely hollow, but enough." Between the fusion core and the surface, there were gaps, spaces carved out and filled with machinery. The probe's sensors detected movement, vast shapes sliding through the plasma like whales through an ocean. Then the probe found something else, a signal, an active transmission coming from inside the array itself. "It's waking up," someone said on the broadcast. "The probe's presence is activating dormant systems." The signal was in binary code, simple enough that even primitive computers could decode it. The message repeated over and over. "Welcome, children of the architects. You have found what we left behind. The forge sleeps, but it dreams of fire. Wake it with care, for it was built to burn galaxies." The probe died seconds later, consumed by plasma temperatures no material could withstand. But it had transmitted enough. The array was not just a dead artifact. It was waiting. Governments immediately declared a no-fly zone around the sun. No ships, no probes, nothing that might accidentally activate the array further. But the damage was done. Humanity now knew that somewhere in their forgotten past, they had been something more than primitive hunters. They had been builders on a scale that made modern civilization look like children playing with blocks. Danny received an encrypted message 3 days after the Icarus 7 mission. It came from an address he didn't recognize, but the authentication codes were legitimate Earth government protocols. "Report to Earth immediately. Your expertise is required for the Prometheus project. Failure to comply will result in termination of employment and possible criminal charges." He showed the message to Linda. She had received an identical one. "They're recruiting everyone who's worked near the sun," she said. "Everyone who might have seen something or who has experience with solar engineering." "Are we going?" Linda looked at him like he was stupid. "Of course we're going. This is the biggest discovery in human history. You think I'm going to miss it?" They took the next transport to Earth, a 3-week journey that felt like 3 months. By the time they arrived, the world had changed again. The United Earth government had formed a new organization called the Stellar Engineering Division, and it had one purpose: figure out how to use the Prometheus array. Danny and Linda were assigned to a team of 40 scientists and engineers, all of them solar specialists. Their leader was a woman named Dr. Patricia Holmes, who had been studying the sun for 30 years and looked like she hadn't slept since the Icarus 7 mission. "Welcome to the madhouse," she said during their first meeting. "Everything you're about to see is classified at the highest level. You talk about this to anyone outside this room, and you'll spend the rest of your life in prison." "Clear." Everyone nodded. Patricia pulled up a holographic display showing the sun's interior. "The array is much larger than we initially thought. It's not just embedded in the sun. It is the sun, or at least it controls the sun. Every fusion reaction, every solar flare, every fluctuation in the star's output is managed by the array's systems." She zoomed in on the core. "We've detected control nodes here, here, and here. They appear to regulate the fusion process, keeping it stable and extracting energy at an efficiency that should be impossible. Our best guess is the array can capture 98% of the sun's total output." Someone in the back raised their hand. "Where does all that energy go?" "Manufacturing bays. We've identified at least 6,000 of them in the shell between the core and the surface. Each bay is roughly the size of Earth's moon. They're currently empty and dormant, but the power feeds are still connected." Patricia let that information settle. 6,000 moon-sized factories, all powered by a star. The industrial capacity was beyond calculation. "Our job is to figure out how to communicate with the array's control systems." Claire Donovan's release of information forced the government's hand. "They can't keep this secret anymore, and other nations are starting to demand access. If we don't figure out how to use the array first, we risk someone else activating it without understanding the dangers." Danny raised his hand. "What kind of dangers?" Patricia's expression darkened. "The kind where the sun explodes. The array is maintaining stellar stability right now, but if we interfere with the wrong systems, we could trigger a nova. Or worse, we could activate the manufacturing systems and discover we can't shut them down. Imagine those 6,000 factories running at full capacity, consuming matter to build something we don't want and can't stop." The team spent the next 3 months studying every bit of data from the Icarus 7 mission and dozens of follow-up probes. They learned that the array responded to electromagnetic signals in specific frequencies. It had what looked like communication protocols, handshake sequences that needed to be completed before it would accept commands. Danny's job was to help decode these protocols. It was frustrating work. The system was designed by people who thought differently than modern humans who had access to physics and mathematics humanity had forgotten. But slowly, piece by piece, they made progress. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A linguist named Gregory Park, who had been studying the binary message from the array, discovered that it wasn't just a warning. It was a key. The specific pattern of ones and zeros was a mathematical sequence that unlocked deeper levels of the array's programming. "It's a test," Gregory explained. "The architects wanted to make sure whoever found the array could understand basic computational theory. Once we send back the right response to their sequence, the array should open up more communication channels." Patricia authorized the transmission. They sent the response from a high-powered laser array on Mercury, beaming it directly into the sun's photosphere at the frequency the array recognized. The response was immediate. Every screen in the research facility lit up with data. The array was talking back, flooding them with information in formats that ranged from images to mathematical formulas to something that looked like musical notation. "It's showing us how to use it," someone said. "This is an instruction manual." They spent the next week decoding the manual. It was written in a visual language that transcended human dialects, using geometry and physics to communicate concepts. The architects had anticipated that their descendants might lose linguistic continuity, so they had created a universal language based on mathematics. What they learned was terrifying. The Prometheus array was not just a factory. It was a weapons system. The architects had built it to fight something they called the harvest, entities that traveled between galaxies consuming resources and leaving dead worlds behind. The war had lasted thousands of years, and the architects had won by building stellar forges in multiple systems, drowning their enemies in infinite warships. They won the war, Patricia said, reading through translated files. But they paid a terrible price. The array systems became too efficient. They couldn't shut down the manufacturing processes. Entire solar systems were consumed, turned into raw materials for the war machine. By the time they figured out how to stop it, most of their civilization was gone. She pulled up an image, a star chart showing dozens of systems. Each one was marked with a symbol that translated to forge consumed. The architects were us, or what we became. They evolved, reached the stars, built wonders. Then they fought a war that destroyed everything. The survivors hid what was left of their forged technology and regressed. They went back to being primitive humans, living simple lives, hoping that by the time we rediscovered the technology, we would be wise enough not to repeat their mistakes. Danny felt sick. Then we shouldn't use it, we should leave it dormant. That's what the government wanted to do, Patricia said. Keep it secret, never touch it, hope no one else found out. But now that Claire Donovan released the information, every major power on Earth and Mars wants access. China, Russia, the European Federation, the African Union, they're all demanding to participate in the research. If we don't establish control protocols now, someone else will, and they might not be as careful as we're trying to be. The next phase of the project was to attempt limited activation. They would try to turn on one manufacturing bay, the smallest one they could find, and see if they could control it. The attempt was scheduled for a Monday morning. Danny barely slept the night before. He kept thinking about those star charts, about civilizations consumed by their own weapons. The control room was packed with scientists, military observers, and government officials. Cameras recorded everything for review by oversight committees. This was the most significant moment in human history since the first atomic bomb test, and everyone knew it. Patricia gave the order. Send activation sequence Alpha 1. The signal traveled from Earth to Mercury, then was amplified and beamed into the Sun. 8 minutes later, they received confirmation. Manufacturing Bay 2847 was coming online. The sensors showed energy flowing from the solar core into the bay. Magnetic containment fields activated, creating pockets of space where materials could exist in stable forms despite being surrounded by million-degree plasma. Particle accelerators spun up, preparing to assemble atoms into whatever pattern the array's programming specified. It's working, someone said. We're in control. Danny watched the energy readings. Something felt wrong. The power draw was increasing faster than the models predicted. We should shut it down, he said. It's just initializing, Patricia replied. Give it time. But the energy readings kept climbing. The manufacturing bay was drawing more and more power, pulling it from the solar core through channels the scientists hadn't even known existed. Then the bay started producing something. We've got matter formation, a technician reported. It's building something, looks like a structural framework, maybe a ship hull. We didn't give it any design specifications, Patricia said. It shouldn't be building anything. Gregory Park pulled up the instruction manual data. There's a default setting. If you activate a bay without specifying a design, it builds from stored templates. The architects left blueprints in the system. The first object emerged from the manufacturing bay 30 seconds later. It was small, only 10 meters long, but it was complete. A perfect sphere of dark metal that reflected no light, floating in the solar plasma like it was in empty space. That material shouldn't exist, someone said. The temperature there is 5,000 degrees. Nothing stays solid in those conditions. The sphere began to move. It traveled through the photosphere toward the surface, navigating the plasma currents like it knew where it was going. It's coming out, Linda said. It's leaving the sun. They watched on exterior cameras as the sphere broke through the sun's surface and entered open space. It should have been glowing red hot. Instead, it was cold, so cold that their sensors registered it at near absolute zero despite having just emerged from a star. The sphere moved toward Earth at impossible speeds, crossing the distance in minutes rather than days. Every defense system in human space went on alert. "Shut it down," Patricia shouted. "Shut down the manufacturing bay." They sent the shutdown sequence. The bay didn't respond. It kept producing spheres, one every 30 seconds, each one following the first toward Earth. "It's not accepting shutdown commands," Danny said. "We've lost control." Patricia's face went white. She reached for a red button on her console, a physical disconnect that would cut all communication with the array. Before she could press it, the spheres arrived at Earth orbit. Every weapon system targeted them, ready to fire. But the spheres didn't attack. They simply stopped, forming a perfect geometric pattern around the planet. Then they started broadcasting. The message came in the same format as the original Icarus 7 transmission, simple binary that any computer could decode. "Warning, harvest vessels detected in deep space. Defense protocols activated. Current manufacturing rate insufficient for expected threat level. Recommend full activation of all forge systems. Time to threat arrival, 584 days. The control room went silent. Everyone stared at the message, trying to understand what it meant. "It detected something," Gregory said quietly. "The array found something in deep space, something it recognizes as a threat. These spheres are sensor probes. It sent them to confirm the detection." Patricia looked at Danny. "The war isn't over. The harvest is coming back." More spheres emerged from the sun, hundreds of them, spreading throughout the solar system. Each one transmitted the same message, confirming the detection of hostile vessels approaching from beyond the Kuiper Belt. Humanity had discovered they possessed the galaxy's most powerful weapon. Now they were going to find out why their ancestors had built it in the first place. The Prometheus array was waking up, and somewhere in the dark between stars, something was coming that had scared the architects badly enough to leave behind a forge that could burn galaxies. Danny thought about those star charts, about civilizations consumed by their own weapons, and wondered if humanity would survive long enough to figure out how to shut the array down before it consumed Earth too. The spheres continued to multiply, spreading through the solar system like seeds from a dandelion, each one watching and waiting for the threat that was coming. And in the research facility, Patricia Holmes looked at her team and said the words nobody wanted to hear. "Get me every military commander in the system. We need to activate the full array. All 6,000 manufacturing bays. Because whatever is coming, those sensor probes think we need more than just warning satellites. They think we need an armada." The vote was taken that night. Every government on Earth and Mars, every colony and station, voted on whether to activate humanity's ancient inheritance. The motion passed with 73% approval. The Prometheus array would wake fully. The forges would burn, and humanity would either save itself or destroy everything their ancestors had tried to preserve. Danny watched the sun that night from the observation deck. Even through the filters, he could see new patterns forming on its surface. More bays were activating, more factories coming online. The geometric hexagons were opening, revealing the machinery beneath. Linda stood next to him, her hand finding his in the darkness. "Do you think we can control it?" she asked. Danny thought about the spheres that hadn't responded to shutdown commands, about an automated system that had recognized a threat and activated itself without permission. He thought about the architects and their warning about forges that burned galaxies. "No," he said honestly. "I don't think we can, but I don't think we have a choice anymore. We either use the array and risk becoming what the architects feared, or we do nothing and let whatever is coming destroy us." The sun continued to change, its surface alive with activity that hadn't been seen in 27,000 years. The forge was waking, and soon the galaxy would see what humanity's ancient ancestors had built in their desperation to survive. For better or worse, the secret was out. The Prometheus array burned, and nothing would ever be the same again. The medical bay on station, Omega, smelled like antiseptic and fear. Dr. Helen Price pressed her palm against the quarantine window and watched the young pilot inside convulse on the examination table. His name was Danny Foster, 23 years old, fresh out of the academy, and 3 days ago he had been perfectly healthy. Now his veins glowed with a soft blue light that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. "How many does this make?" asked Captain Greg Sullivan, standing beside her with his arms crossed. 47, Helen said quietly. "All of them crew members who worked directly with the array's new systems. Whatever is happening, it started when we activated the deep integration protocols." Greg had commanded the Prometheus Defense Fleet for 8 months now, ever since Admiral Harper had taken a leave of absence to deal with what the official reports called exhaustion, but what everyone knew was a complete mental breakdown. The weight of destroying 2 planets had crushed her, and now Greg carried that same burden. "The array is changing them," Helen continued. "Their neural patterns are rewriting themselves. Brain activity is increasing by factors we cannot measure. And the light in their blood, we tested it. It is not biological. It is pure energy somehow contained within their circulatory systems." Danny opened his eyes suddenly. They blazed with the same blue light that filled his veins. He sat up smoothly, the restraints that had held him down falling away like they were made of paper. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that made the medical equipment nearby flicker and hum. "Do not be afraid, Dr. Price. I am still Danny. But I am also more than Danny now. The array has shown me what we can become." Helen stepped back from the window. This was exactly what the Coalition had feared. The Star Forge was not just building ships anymore. It was remaking humans into something else. "What did it show you?" Greg asked carefully. Danny tilted his head, and for a moment he looked like a child trying to explain colors to someone born blind. "The architects left us more than weapons. They left us the path they walked. Humanity is not meant to stay as we are. The array is a chrysalis, Captain. We are supposed to transform." "Into what?" "Into something that can survive what is coming next." Before Greg could respond, alarms began screaming throughout the station. Helen pulled up the emergency feed on her tablet and felt her stomach drop. The gate near Neptune, the one they thought had gone dormant after the Harvester attack, was active again. But this time it was not disgorging enemy ships. It was pulling something through from the other side, something massive. Greg sprinted toward the command center with Helen close behind. They burst through the doors to find the tactical team already at their stations, staring at displays that showed an object emerging from the gate that dwarfed anything they had seen before. Lieutenant Chris Morgan looked up from his console, his face pale. "Sir, that thing is 3,000 kilometers long. It is not a ship. It is a structure of some kind. And it is broadcasting a signal directly at Earth." "What kind of signal?" "A countdown. In every language humanity has ever spoken, including ones we thought were extinct. It says we have 30 days to surrender the array, or they will sterilize our entire solar system." Greg felt the blood drain from his face. "Who is they?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Danny Foster walked into the command center, moving with an eerie grace that made him seem to glide rather than walk. The security team reached for their weapons, but Greg waved them down. "The Harvesters were just scouts," Danny said, his glowing eyes fixed on the tactical display. "That structure is a Reaper ship. The Harvesters serve something older and far more dangerous. The Reapers travel between galaxies, and they have been doing it for billions of years. Every civilization that reaches a certain level of technology gets a visit from them. Most species never even see them coming. The Reapers simply delete them from existence." "How do you know this?" Helen demanded. Danny smiled, and it was a sad expression despite the inhuman light in his eyes. "Because the array just downloaded 10,000 years of architect history directly into my brain. I know everything they knew. And I know why they built the Star Forge. They built it because the Reapers cannot be defeated by conventional warfare. The only way to fight them is to become something they cannot predict or understand." Greg looked at the young pilot who was rapidly becoming something other than human. "The transformation. The array is trying to evolve us fast enough to fight these Reapers. Not just fight them, outlast them. The Reapers have a cycle. They cleanse the galaxy every 50,000 years, but they are not immortal. If a species can survive long enough, change enough, the Reapers eventually move on to the next galaxy. The architects almost made it. They held out for 3,000 years before the Reapers finally destroyed them, but they bought enough time to hide their technology and leave it for us." Helen looked at the other 46 patients in quarantine, all of them starting to show the same blue glow, the same unearthly awareness. How many humans will transform before this is over? All of us, Danny said simply. The array released nanomachines into Earth's atmosphere 6 months ago. Every human alive has them in their bloodstream now. It has just been waiting for the right trigger to activate them. The Reaper ship's arrival is that trigger. Within 24 hours, every person on Earth and the colonies will begin to change. That is insane, Greg said. You are talking about forcibly evolving the entire species without consent, without choice. The architects faced the same dilemma, Danny replied. They had a vote. It took them 3 years of debate while the Reapers destroyed their colonies one by one. By the time they decided to transform, they had lost 70% of their population. We do not have 3 years, Captain. We have 30 days. The command center doors opened again, and Ambassador Kyle Martinez walked in, looking like he had aged 20 years since the coalition meeting 8 months ago. Behind him came a delegation of alien scientists, including the Drathian quantum theorist Kelvith and a Velkrin military strategist named Kresh. I heard about the countdown, Kyle said without preamble. The coalition is evacuating. Every species with ships in this system is jumping to hyperspace as fast as they can load their crews. They are leaving us to face this alone. Cowards, Kresh muttered, his mandibles clicking with disgust. The Velkrin Empire does not run. I volunteered to stay and help however I can. Kelvith's gills fluttered. As did I. If the Reapers succeed here, they will eventually reach our homeworlds too. Better to make a stand now with allies than face them alone later. Greg appreciated the gesture, but he knew the math. 2 alien volunteers could not change the outcome of this fight. We need a strategy. Danny, you said the architects held out for 3,000 years. How? They did not fight the Reapers ship to ship. They fought them on a quantum level. The architects learned to exist in multiple states simultaneously. They became probability clouds instead of solid matter. The Reapers' weapons were designed to destroy physical targets, so the architects simply stopped being physical. And that is what the array wants to turn us into, Helen asked, horror and fascination mixing in her voice. Quantum ghosts. That is one possibility, but the array is more advanced than what the architects had. It has had 27,000 years to refine the process. I do not think it wants to make us into ghosts. I think it wants to make us into something that can rewrite reality itself. The implications hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Greg looked at his crew, at the aliens who had chosen to stand with them, at Danny Foster, who was already more than human. Then he made a decision that would haunt him for whatever passed for the rest of his life. If the transformation is inevitable, then we need to control it. We need volunteers who will undergo the process first, people who can learn how to use these new abilities and teach others. We turn this from a chaotic evolution into a coordinated one. I volunteer, Danny said immediately. You are already transforming, Greg pointed out. Then I will be the first to complete it. Let me show everyone else that we can survive this change and stay ourselves. Over the next 72 hours, the transformation swept across humanity like wildfire. It started with the people who had been exposed to the array's systems most directly, then spread to anyone who had been in contact with them. Helen watched it happen with clinical fascination and personal terror, documenting every stage even as she felt the nanomachines in her own blood beginning to activate. The process was not gentle. People screamed as their neurons rewired themselves. They thrashed as their bodies rebuilt themselves on a cellular level. Some of them did not survive, their systems unable to handle the strain. The death toll climbed to 3,000, then 5,000, then 10,000 before the transformation began to stabilize. But those who survived emerged changed in ways that defied description. They could perceive dimensions that human senses had never accessed before. They could manipulate energy directly with their thoughts. And most remarkably, they could connect to each other in a network of consciousness that spanned the entire species. Helen completed her transformation on the 5th day. One moment she was lying in her quarters, feeling like her brain was on fire. The next moment she opened her eyes and saw the universe in a completely new way. Reality was not solid. It was fluid, malleable, a sea of quantum possibilities waiting to be shaped by will and intention. And she could feel them. Every human who had transformed, she could sense them like distant stars in a vast constellation. She felt Danny Foster working with a team of transformed engineers to upgrade the array's defenses. She felt Greg Sullivan coordinating with military commanders across 3 solar systems. She felt Kyle Martinez arguing with coalition diplomats who wanted to bomb Earth before humanity became too powerful to stop. Most of all, she felt the fear. 11 billion humans facing extinction and forced evolution, terrified of what they were becoming but more terrified of the alternative. The Reaper ship crossed into the inner solar system on day 14. It moved slowly, almost contemptuously, broadcasting its countdown for all to hear. 20 Velcrin ships that had stayed behind as a gesture of solidarity tried to engage it and were simply erased from existence. One moment they were firing every weapon they had. The next moment there was nothing, not even debris. The Reapers had deleted them from reality as easily as wiping words from a page. "We cannot fight that," Chris Morgan said, watching the tactical display. He had transformed 3 days ago and now his mind could process information at speeds that made quantum computers look slow. "Every weapon we have is based on physical principles, mass, energy, momentum. But that ship exists partially outside of normal space-time. Shooting at it is like shooting at a shadow." "Then we do not shoot at it," Danny said. He stood at the center of the command center, surrounded by a dozen other transformed humans, all of them linked in a network of shared consciousness. "We meet it in the space between spaces. We fight it with weapons it has never encountered before." "What weapons?" Greg asked. Danny's eyes blazed brighter. "Ourselves." The plan was insane, but it was the only plan they had. 300 transformed humans, the most powerful and stable of those who had completed the evolution, would project their consciousness directly at the Reaper ship. They would enter whatever quantum realm it inhabited and attack it from within, using abilities that humanity was still learning to understand. Helen was chosen as one of the 300. So was Danny, Chris, and a brilliant young scientist named Peter Grant who had figured out how to weaponize quantum entanglement. They gathered in a specially prepared chamber deep within Station Omega, lying on acceleration couches while technicians attached neural interface cables to their heads. "Remember," Danny said, his voice echoing through their shared mental network, "we are not attacking the ship's hull. We are attacking its existence. We find the probability threads that keep it anchored in this reality and we cut them. We make it choose between staying to fight us or retreating to a dimension where it can survive." "And if it chooses to stay and fight?" someone asked. "Then we show it what happens when you threaten a species that has learned to rewrite the laws of physics." The connection sequence began. Helen felt her consciousness expand outward, leaving her body behind like a discarded coat. She rose through levels of reality she had never imagined existed, passing through dimensions where time flowed backwards and space folded into impossible shapes. And then she saw it. The Reaper ship in its true form, not the 3-dimensional shadow it projected into normal space, but the vast, horrifying totality of its existence. It was not a ship. It was a weapon that spanned 11 dimensions, a construct of pure mathematics and weaponized entropy. Looking at it directly made Helen's expanded consciousness want to scream. But she was not alone. 300 transformed humans surrounded the Reaper, and behind them she could feel the weight of 11 billion others, all of them linked in the network, all of them lending their strength. The Reaper noticed them. Helen felt its attention turn toward the humans, felt it analyze them with senses that had cataloged and destroyed 10 million civilizations across 1 billion years. She felt it recognize what they were trying to become, and felt its decision to stop them before they could complete the transformation. The attack came from directions that had no names in human language. The Reaper struck at them through folded time, through inverted probability, through spaces where cause and effect were reversed. 3 of the 300 died instantly, their consciousness shredded across infinite timelines. But the rest fought back. Peter Grant launched the first counterstrike, using quantum entanglement to link the Reaper ship to a star about to go supernova 300 light-years away. The Reaper severed the connection before it could be destroyed, but the attack proved they could hurt it. Danny went next, finding the probability threads that anchored the Reaper in their dimension and attacking them directly. He could not cut them, they were too strong, but he could fray them, weaken them, make the Reaper work harder to stay manifested. Helen discovered something the others had missed. The Reaper ship was old, older than Earth's sun, older than many galaxies, and with that age came damage, wounds from previous battles that had never fully healed. She found one of those wounds, a crack in the Reaper's dimensional armor, and she poured all her will into widening it. The Reaper screamed, not with sound but with disrupted mathematics, equations failing across multiple dimensions. Tried to retreat, but the 300 humans had surrounded it, cut off its escape routes back to whatever realm it had come from. It was trapped, forced to fight in a space where it was vulnerable. For 6 hours that felt like 6 years they battled. More humans died, their consciousness scattered across dimensions they could not navigate. But the Reaper was dying too. Every attack weakened it further, every defense cost it energy it could not easily replace. Finally, Danny found the killing stroke. He gathered the combined will of all 300 attackers, focused it into a single point of directed probability, and drove it through the wound Helen had opened. The attack did not destroy the Reaper ship. It did something worse. It cut the ship's connection to linear time. The Reaper ship began to exist in all times simultaneously. It was being built and being destroyed, attacking Earth and retreating to its home dimension, winning and losing across infinite timelines all at once. The paradox tore it apart from within, and with a final mathematical shriek that echoed across 11 dimensions, it collapsed into quantum uncertainty and ceased to exist in any meaningful way. Helen opened her eyes back in her body and immediately vomited. Around her, the other survivors were doing the same, their minds struggling to readjust to being confined to 3 dimensions and linear time. Of the 300 who had entered the quantum battle, only 147 had survived. But they had won. The Reaper ship was gone, deleted from reality as thoroughly as it had deleted the Velcrin volunteers. The celebration across human space lasted for exactly 6 hours before the next crisis hit. Ambassador Kyle Martinez called an emergency meeting of every transformed human leader, and his face on the holographic display looked grim. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "The Coalition just issued an ultimatum. They watched what we did to the Reaper ship. They saw humans manipulate reality itself, saw us fight in dimensions they did not even know existed, and now they are terrified. They are demanding that we either destroy the array and reverse the transformation, or they will consider us an existential threat and take action." Greg Sullivan laughed bitterly. "Take action. We just killed something that has been cleansing galaxies for billions of years. What exactly do they think they can do to us?" "They are not thinking rationally," Kyle replied. "They are thinking like every species does when they encounter something they cannot understand or control. They want to destroy it before it destroys them." Helen felt a wave of anger ripple through the transformed human network. They had sacrificed thousands of lives to save not just humanity but the entire galaxy from the Reapers, and this was the thanks they received. "Can we reverse it?" she asked quietly. "Is there a way to undo the transformation?" Danny shook his head. "The array was not designed with a reverse function. Once you evolve past a certain point, going back would be like trying to unscramble an egg. You would have to destroy and rebuild every transformed human from scratch. And even if we could do it, the Reapers know about us now. They will send more ships, bigger ones. Without our new abilities, we would be wiped out." "Then we have a choice to make," Greg said. "Do we show the Coalition that we are still human, still reasonable, still willing to coexist? Or do we show them that we are now too powerful to threaten?" The debate that followed was not like the arguments of old humanity. With 300 million humans now transformed and linked in a mental network, discussions happened at the speed of thought. Every perspective was heard, every consequence analyzed, every possible outcome modeled. In the end, they chose a middle path, one that would prove humanity's peaceful intentions while making it clear that threatening them would be futile. They rebuilt Mercury. Using the array's capabilities and their own transformed abilities to manipulate matter and energy, they reconstructed the planet from the cosmic dust that remained. But they did not just rebuild it as it had been. They made it better, a paradise world with oceans and forests and ecosystems designed to support life forms from dozens of species. And then they offered it to the coalition as a gift. "We took Mercury to save ourselves," Kyle told the assembled alien delegates. "Now we give it back improved, as proof that our transformation has not made us monsters. We are still human. We still value life. We still want to build rather than destroy." The gesture worked barely. The coalition withdrew their ultimatum but established a quarantine zone around human space that no transformed human was allowed to cross. It was clear that the galaxy's other species would need generations to come to terms with what humanity had become. Helen stood in the observation deck of Station Omega 6 months after the Reaper War, as people were calling it. Through the window she could see Earth, still beautiful, still home, but she could also see so much more now. She could see the quantum foam underlying reality, the probability waves that determined which version of the universe would manifest from moment to moment. Danny joined her, moving with the eerie grace all transformed humans now possessed. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Becoming this?" Helen thought about it honestly. She had lost her humanity in the classical sense. She would never age, never die of natural causes, never experience reality the way she once had. But she had gained something too. A connection to her entire species, abilities that let her help people in ways she never could have before, and the power to defend Earth from threats that would have destroyed them. "No," she said finally, "but I mourn what we lost. We did not choose this path. The array chose it for us. The Reapers forced us onto it. We survived, but we paid a price that we will still be calculating for centuries." "The architects left us a message," Danny said. "I found it buried deep in the array's code. They said that every civilization faces this choice eventually, evolve or die. They chose to evolve and they died anyway, but they bought us time to make the same choice. Maybe we will do better than they did. Or maybe we will just delay the inevitable," Helen replied. "The Reapers are still out there. They will come back, and next time they will know what we can do." Danny smiled, and for a moment he looked almost human again. "Then we will evolve again. That is what humans do best. We adapt, we survive. We become whatever we need to be to protect the people we love." Far above them, the Prometheus array continued its work, no longer building ships but constructing something new. A beacon, designed to call out across the galaxy to any other species facing the Reaper threat. An invitation to join humanity in the next stage of evolution, or at least to share knowledge that might help them survive. The galaxy feared humanity's secret star forge and what it had made them into. But fear, Helen realized, was just another form of respect. And in a universe filled with ancient horrors that wanted to wipe out all life, being feared might be the only thing that kept you alive long enough to find a better way. She returned to her work, helping newly transformed humans adjust to their abilities, knowing that every day brought new challenges and new opportunities. Humanity had been forced to evolve, forced to become something beyond what they once were, but they had survived. And in a galaxy where civilizations rose and fell like waves on an endless ocean, survival was its own form of victory. The Star Forge had given them power. The transformation had given them abilities beyond imagination. Now it was up to humanity to prove they could wield both without becoming the very monsters they had fought to defeat. It was a test that would take generations to pass or fail, but it was a test they were determined to ace. Because that was what humans did. They faced impossible odds, impossible choices, and impossible transformations. And somehow, against all logic and probability, they found a way through. Not unchanged, not unscathed, but alive, always adapting. Always reaching for something better, even when the price of reaching was higher than they ever wanted to pay.